It honestly broke the bottom line of my work ethic. What's up everyone, this is Rita aka Fàn Lǎoshī, your accent coach and Chinese teacher. A while back, I asked some of my non-native Chinese-speaking friends who have studied and lived in China, as well as my followers on Instagram, what bad experiences have you had with a Chinese tutor/teacher/class? It wasn't even a serious survey, but I got a bunch of messages in one day. Is it weird that while so many people are teaching Mandarin Chinese on social media, not many really talk about their job? That is, how they teach. Why are some teachers paid 10 times or 15 times more than others? Language teaching goes way beyond giving some explanations of a couple of words or phrases. So today, let's talk about what makes a bad Mandarin Chinese teacher or tutor, and on the other side, what makes a great one. But first, make sure you subscribe to this channel and hit the little bell so you don't miss out on any Mandarin learning tips that you won't find anywhere else. 订阅了吗? Let's go. 1. They don't administer any assessment of your current level in the demo class or in the first class. This is a rookie but common mistake. If you go to a language school, there should be a placement test. If you sign up for an online course, there is typically fixed content provided that you don't get to choose from. But if you are working with a Chinese tutor, the first thing they need to figure out is what you can do with the language at that time and ask which level you want to eventually reach. No lawyer can help you win a case without first knowing what problem you are facing. No doctor can help you recover without first knowing what symptoms you have. And no Chinese teacher can really help you improve without understanding what you already know and what you want to do in the future. That said, the method for assessing a Mandarin learner's current language abilities is a whole other topic. It doesn't tell me anything if you say you've been learning Mandarin for X years. Neither does passing HSK XYZ levels or having studied from ABC textbooks. Most of the time, a language learner's abilities in listening, speaking, reading, and writing are quite different or imbalanced. And this is even more true when it comes to Mandarin Chinese. So it's all the more important teachers and tutors do their best to learn about their students and what they'll need to focus on. 2. They don't have a teaching/learning plan for you, or even worse, they just randomly chat. Alright, let's assume that the teacher is aware of your language abilities in terms of listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and they know what your learning goal is if you have a specific one. Ideally, the next question is, how can you get there with the teacher's help? Now, I know some experienced language learners believe that you don't really need a teacher to learn a language, despite how close or distant the target language is from your native language. And look, I don't disagree with the argument, but this is only if you clearly know what you are doing in order to reach your goal. Can a patient cure themselves without a doctor? Possibly. Is there a risk? Definitely. Now, being able to learn a language is just not as obvious nor as serious as an uncured illness. The value a language teacher can offer is found in their ability to guide the students along their language learning journey, and as much as possible, make the process more effective while avoiding bad habits that affect future learning. Adult learners don't have the same singular focus or multiple hours per day to immerse in and acquire the language as naturally as kids do. You all know who I'm talking about. College students, 9-to-5 job employees, and 2 kids' parents, right? To learn Mandarin Chinese, or really any language, more quickly, we need to prioritize something from all aspects of the language over others. Pick the learning materials that fit your level and practice the stuff you are working on through the method for learning Mandarin Chinese as a second language, nor for native speakers. I'll elaborate more on this in the 6th point of this video. The bottom line is that if the tutor never prepares anything before your class and instead just chats about random stuff without anything more systematic, it's almost guaranteed that you've hired a language partner instead of a Chinese teacher. 3. They just stick to a textbook and never freestyle. In reality, there is an easy choice available for most Chinese tutors that you find on those freelance platforms that offer a systematic plan form. Textbooks. Even in most universities, Chinese departments are always looking for better textbooks, and when there aren't any, they may just write new ones. The most commonly used textbooks that I've used and seen are usually written and edited by a few experienced teachers, and it can take years to finally publish one. It's a good thing that the content is picked and written based on more than one teacher's judgment and their own sense of the language. On the flip side, it also takes years to validate a textbook's quality, and by then, some content might already be a bit outdated. More importantly, the content written by college professors for college students is more likely to be about school life and topics that students would encounter. In this case, is it really the best choice for all Mandarin learners? I'd give it a second thought. Another convenient thing for a lot of Chinese tutors that use a textbook is that the book usually comes with exercises and homework, so the teacher doesn't even need to bother coming up with anything themselves if they don't want to. I've tutored and helped many students pass the HSK5 test within months by using the standard course books, which is the only thing you need to pass the test. This was honestly not too challenging to the students, and definitely not to me. But the exercises in the textbooks are not always great, nor do they always meet the students' real needs. And that's where the teacher needs to freestyle and be creative. This improvisation should be based on a thorough understanding of the modern Chinese language, vast reading, and regular viewing of fresh Mandarin Chinese content. Outside textbooks, there definitely are some great learning materials. If you are interested, let me know in the comments and I'll share what I think are the best learning materials in recent years. 4. They say that's just the way it is in Chinese and cannot explain why. A deeper problem among Chinese tutors who only use and follow textbooks is that the textbooks might be the only books they have ever read for teaching Mandarin Chinese. The bar is pretty low for someone to claim themselves as a Mandarin Chinese teacher. I mean, due to government policy changes over the past few years, a lot of English teachers in China who are Chinese natives lost their jobs and became online Chinese language teachers overnight. But how long does it take for a decent Chinese language teacher to learn, grow, and know what they are doing when working with a student? People like to talk about how long it takes to learn the language, but they rarely think about how long it takes to cultivate a teacher, yeah? I might have been a slow learner, but this is a timeline that I know quite a few great teachers follow too. It personally took me 3 years to study the basics of the modern Chinese language, mainly grammar, for my master's degree. And then another 4 years teaching in the best Chinese programs and universities in China and in the US. In fact, this is another must-have part of the job, to be trained, challenged, and to think and reflect. Eventually, I finally had the confidence to quit my job at the best Chinese university and start my own business. Another example is my pronunciation course. I started training actors and focusing on Mandarin Chinese pronunciation in 2018. And it took me 3 years to observe, read, and test training methods as well as materials before I had a more thorough understanding of the Chinese sound system, which has long been ignored by most schools, curriculum, textbooks, and teachers. Then it took more than a year for me to do the research, modify the course framework, and put together all the pieces of information and my experiences into 107 lessons as a training system. This covered everything from the underlying layer of our Mandarin speaking voice all the way to the subtle changes, reductions, and sentence intonations that you will never find in any textbooks or classes. To be honest, I believe Mandarin learners at any level can benefit from this training course for your speaking and listening. A lot of verified language facts and teaching methods are just lying in academic books, some for almost a century already. But so few Chinese teachers bother to read or think. Being a TikTok teacher or a YouTuber may be faster because you don't have to answer questions. I mean, native speakers can always say something about their mother tongue. But it takes years of time, effort, and experience to be a truly effective Chinese teacher or tutor that really helps. Anyway, next time a Chinese teacher tells you, that's just the way it is, it's probably just because they don't know why themselves. 5. They don't like to use the language in class. This is unbelievable, but apparently it still happens a lot. Note, reading from a vocabulary list, reading dialogues in the textbooks, and speaking English or your native language is not using Mandarin Chinese. Using the words, phrases, and sentences structures you learn to answer questions, express your thoughts, and have a real conversation with your tutor is using the language. 6. They never correct you. Personally, I always prefer being called a Mandarin Chinese instructor to a Mandarin Chinese teacher because the former feels more like reflecting on this job. Teaching the knowledge of the language, including pronunciation, words, grammar, etc. Sure, that's part of the job that takes some time in class. But most of the class time should be saved for the student to open their mouths and use the language. At the same time, the role of the teacher transforms into that of an instructor, conducting the conversation/drill, as well as a sounding board to give feedback so that the student knows what to pay more attention to and how exactly to improve. This is the essential difference between a Chinese as a second language teacher and a Chinese teacher of natives. None of the Chinese teachers that I had in my life told me much about my mother tongue, but instead, they focused on ancient Chinese and classic literature. A shocking fact, linguistics and literature are two different things. When giving a Mandarin learner feedback, it's easy to say, very good, but it's hard to spot the problem and even harder to make sense of it to then help the students fix it. In a lot of cases, adult students might find it a bit offensive to be told, you are making a mistake. And it's particularly hard for most Chinese people to confront someone and tell them, you are doing this wrong. It's just not our culture, nor is it the way people communicate. But you wouldn't pay for a fitness coach who only tells you, you are doing great, or a doctor who only tells you, you are perfectly healthy. Well, I wouldn't. So when you pick a Chinese teacher or tutor, make sure that you are spending time with someone who is more than just a Chinese native who can't give any feedback on your language learning development. 7. They don't adjust the class pace and they ignore the students' progress. This happens more often in group classes, but it's also something I heard that some Chinese tutors do. If you feel the class is moving forward too quickly or too slowly, and the tutor doesn't adjust to your learning pace, there is definitely something that can be improved. It's not always good to go over a lot in one class, especially in one that's just an hour. The amount of content reviewed as well as the pace depends on how much the students can process one time. And it also depends on how well the teacher can help the student to really learn the stuff. It may take 1 minute to briefly introduce a verb complement or a usage of le, but it can also take 20 minutes to explain the complement, introduce the most commonly used contexts, and then practice, correct, and repeat before moving on. This is also the part that you cannot tell from a YouTube video, let alone a TikTok video. How helpful a Chinese teacher could be to the students when they really work together. 8. They never take notes for you. This is a more practical point. In a typical Chinese natives class, it's always like this. The teacher speaks and teaches for most of the time, and the students just sit quietly and take notes. It shouldn't be like this in a Chinese language one-on-one class or language class in general. Save time to use the language and get the most from the time you pay. The tutor can definitely take notes more quickly than you. 9. They check their phones a lot in class. I still remember how shocked I was when one of my students told me that his former tutor checked her phone throughout their tutoring class. It honestly broke the bottom line of my work ethic. Give 100% of your attention to the students in class. No exceptions, no excuses. 10. They don't speak any foreign language themselves. This might be a bit controversial, but I want to start a discussion here. Think about how many native English teachers teach English only in English. In that case, it seems that the language teacher doesn't have to speak a foreign language. But despite so much great English content that you can find effortlessly on the internet, and so much time a lot of people, at least young Chinese people, put into English learning, how important is it for a Chinese teacher to be able to speak decent English or a second language? I think it's more about how much the teacher can empathize with the student during the process of learning a language, especially when it comes to Chinese. How deep is the teacher's understanding of the differences between the languages, from grammatic categories, word selection, and pronunciation in real conversations? Do they get how tough the process is bridging the gap between one language to another? I'm not saying that the Chinese teacher needs to speak a lot of English in class, because on the contrary, responsible teachers tend to use Mandarin with the student as much as possible. But when there are more abstract things that need to be explained, or things that lie beyond the student's current level to understand, the ability to switch to English or the student's native language is absolutely helpful in order to make the best use of class time. Alright, there you have it, 10 signs that you have a bad Chinese tutor. Have you experienced any of these? Is there something you agree or disagree with? Let me know in the comments. Share your experience and stories too. And remember, with Fàn Lǎoshī, Chinese makes perfect sense. See you in the next video.